And for His Worship, the Mayor and colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. Please remain standing for praise by my chaplain, Reverend Martin Freeman, before we start the meeting.
Merciful God, our Father, we pray homage for Marlene, who has labored and now rests in peace. We pray for her family and friends, that they will rejoice that she gave her service for the people of Turvan and the world. And all at this moment, Lord, we pray for the leaders of the world, Her Majesty the Queen, our Prime Minister, the First Minister, our Chief Executive, our Mayor, and the leaders of Turvan Council. May you give us wisdom and understanding to lead this county for peace and prosperity. Help us to do things that are difficult, that will bring tranquility to your children. Help us to serve you well, so when our time shall come, we can rest and we will say, well done to ourselves and to our country. Now, Lord, bless the Mayor as he gathers through this meeting. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please be seated. I'd like to remind you all that this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so we're all on camera. Please be aware that you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. There's no need for members to stand. Cameras are focused on people sitting down, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today, councillors, officers, members of the press and public, and anyone else attending, and of course anybody watching via the webcast. Please, can all mobile phones and any other noisy devices please be put on silent. If there's an emergency alarm, follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Car Park. If you have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. Agenda item 1, attendance. The attendance register is going around the room. Please, can all members sign it and pass it on. Item 2, apologies for absence. Richard, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Mary Barnett, Stuart Ashley, Pam Cameron, Graham Smith, Mandy Owen and Ron Burnett.
Thank you. Members, are there any other apologies? No? Now we go on to item number 3. Oh, sorry, Councillor Seaborn.
Councillor Len Constance.
Thank you. Right, we go on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Monitoring Officer, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only item that I think may attract interest is in relation to item 14. That's where members will be asked to select 2 members to sit on a new Audit and Risk Assurance Committee of the Education Achievement Service. I've had discussions with Councillor Clark and Councillor Lewis Jones. Councillor Clark is the council-appointed Director of the EAS, and Councillor Jones is his substitute. And after some discussion, councillors, I think you wish to declare prejudicial interest and not take part in that selection. Is that agreed?
Thank you. Members, do you have any other interest to declare? No? Can you make sure that any interests are also written on the normal forms, please? Right, we go on to item number 4, the minutes, 15th of December 2015. Can someone move that the minutes are correct? Thank you. Are we all agreed? Yes? Thank you, members. Right, we go to agenda item 5, update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 21 of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments? No? Everyone happy to note the updates? Thank you, members. They are noted. We'll go on to item number 6, receipt of petitions. There's no petitions for today, so we move straight on to item 7, public question time. There's also no public questions today, so we go straight into item 8, announcements. Leader, do you have any announcements to make today, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a number of announcements to make, and I know that the Deputy Leader will have an announcement after I've finished. First announcement is that I was pleased as Leader that we were able to announce earlier this month that Torfaen Council will pay the registration fees for teaching assistants working in our schools. The new registration scheme in Wales, which has been welcomed by teaching assistants and their trade unions, aims to improve recognition and regulation of teaching assistants. However, we were concerned that the £15 fee would have been taken from the pay of our teacher assistants, who are not highly paid at all. After discussions with the trade union, we agreed to their request to pay the fee to stop the teaching assistants being worse off. I hope that this will be seen as a sign of our appreciation for the fantastic work that teacher assistants do in our schools. The next announcement is regarding Estin. Last week, the news that we were coming out of education special measures was confirmed by Estin after a successful inspection visit during last week in November. As Leader, I would like to thank all those whose hard work has enabled us to reach this milestone. Special thanks have to go to officers led by the Chief Executive, who certainly stepped up to the mark, David Congreve and Dermot McChrystal, and to members led by our Executive Member David Yowell, and also Colette Thomas, the Chair of our Learning and Scrutiny Committee. Head teachers across Torfaen and their staff also deserve great credit for their dedication to raising the standards in our schools. The members of our Children and Young People's Improvement Board have come together from various organisations, and all have been united in their goal of improving standards. I'd also like to pay tribute to the members of our Recovery Board, who have been a valuable source of advice and support. We've never viewed coming out of special measures as the ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal continues to be to provide the best possible education for all our young people. This news is therefore a milestone rather than the end of a journey, and I'm therefore pleased that our corporate plan and medium-term financial planning will continue to put education at the front and the centre of our priorities. Many people complain about local government and central government, but this is proof that when they work closely together in collaboration, it really does work. Thank you to all those involved. The next thing I want to talk about is Councillor Marlene Thomas. We know that the Mayor just made his condolences. So it was with great sadness that I learned of the death of former Councillor Marlene Thomas. I knew Marlene over many years, first when she was a councillor for Gwent County Council, and more recently when we served together on Torfaen County Borough Council. Marlene was certainly one of the most able councillors that it's been my privilege to have worked with. A trained lawyer, she brought her analytical skills and insight into her council work, and until her retirement in 2012, she held a cabinet portfolio for resources, a demanding role which required a knowledge and understanding of the broad sweep of council work and how public services are managed and funded. Her ability to remain calm, often under extreme pressure, inspired members and officers alike, and I drew strength from her examples. Marlene was recognised across Wales and further afield as a person of substance, highly intelligent and principled, a committed socialist. I met her recently at and her natural spark in an ability to laugh undermined that she was relaxed and chatty with everyone she met, irrespective of their seniority or status, though most especially with her constituents in her ward of Crossy Celliog. I'm sure other members have fond memories as well. My best wishes go to Marlene's family. For members' information, Marlene's funeral will be taking place on Thursday this week at 2:30 at the Gwent Crematorium. I've got another announcement, but I want Anthony to say a few words first about Coed School, and this will be the last announcement, so I'll come in after you, Anthony.
Great, thank you, Leader. As Marlene's successor as Exec Member for Resources, I'd like to add my voice to that tribute to her. She really was someone whose legend remained after she left the council, and it's been a pleasure to try and follow in her footsteps. On behalf of the Leader, I'd just like to give a word of praise for all those who've worked so hard to get Coed School back up and running since the awful fire there on New Year's Day. Along with the Leader and Councillor Yole, I visited the school last week to tour the site and speak with the head teacher and governors, and the progress they've made in just 3 weeks is outstanding. Also outstanding has been the response from the local community, who've rallied round to support the school by holding fundraising events, including raffles, a disco and a fun run this weekend, run by a team including our own Councillor Cross. So I'd just like to pay tribute both to the school, the teachers and the local community for a really outstanding example of, when the worst happens, that we can all rally round and make sure that the school and the pupils have got a good future to look forward to.
My last announcement, Mr. Mayor, which is interesting, and I'm sure members from all over the borough will find this interesting. I'd like to introduce council to Mr. Charles Minaprio, whose father was Anthony, and he was the chief architect and town planner responsible for designing the original master plan for Cwmbran Town back in 1951. I'd like to thank Mr. Minaprio for the donation of his father's, Anthony's, records of his work on Cwmbran Town Centre, or Cwmbran, never mind about Cwmbran Town Centre. He had previously worked on Crawley, Newtown, and was reported as being very enthusiastic and eager to have the job because of the exciting adventure it would be to plan the area from scratch with a blank piece of paper. His vision of a carefully planned and balanced community was taken up, and the master plan was completed in less than 2 years, with only a handful of objections at the public inquiry of the plan way back in 1951. While some of the original ideas, such as a helicopter landing ground, didn't make the final plan, the legacy of his original master planning work can be seen throughout Cwmbran today. The centrally located town centre serving the area, the surrounding 7 neighbourhoods with their local centres, the extensive network of green spaces through to his work on the preservation of the canal as a linear path through the town against calls for its complete removal, all survived and have made Cwmbran the mature green community that we live in today. The Royal Town Planning Institute chose to visit Cwmbran as part of their centenary celebrations as the only modern town in Wales, and all the visitors expressed their approval of the way that Cwmbran had developed and agreed with Lord Silkin's view that we can build a very good town here. I would again like to thank Mr. Minaprio for his donation and express thanks to the people of Cwmbran for his father's work, which we are all benefiting from today. Mr. Minaprio is now going to come down the front and present me with the plans. Members are invited from Cwmbran and Pontypool and Blanabon for that matter, because I'm sure they've all got a keen interest in Cwmbran, and they can ask Mr. Minaprio some questions. He said he can't answer them all, but he'll try his best. Anyway, come down, Mr. Minaprio. Here he is. This is the original from 1951. 1951, that's right.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements, please?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the Leader's covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you then, members. We'll go straight on to item 9, the Constitution, amending the policy framework. Linda Willis, our Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, can you present your report to us, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As members will see from the report, that in the Constitution we have a paragraph which sets out our policy framework, and that's the list of major plans and strategies which require Council approval. And the report outlines the need for updating this because some of the plans are either obsolete or they've been subsumed in overarching plans. The appendix to the report sets out why certain plans are asked that should be deleted and why new ones should be inserted. You'll see we have the corporate plan, the medium-term financial plan, the workforce plan and the asset management plan set up so that as and when those plans are ready, they will come before full council for approval. If anyone has any questions on the proposed revised list of policy framework plans and strategies, I'd be pleased to take them. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No? Thank you then. The recommendations are on page 27. We're asked to agree the changes to the policy framework of the Constitution as set out in the report, and that the Chief Legal and Monitoring Officer is authorised to amend the Constitution to reflect those changes. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4? Right. I think that's unanimous. Thank you, members. The recommendations are agreed. Right, we go on to item 10, which is the corporate plan. Councillor Anthony Hunt, Deputy Leader, can you present your report to us, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the interests of brevity and because you've got the agenda item in front of you, I won't take you through that step by step. What I will do is add to it with a very short verbal report. This obviously follows up on the report that was given to the last council before Christmas, which gave members a chance to have an input into the corporate plan. Since then, some work has been done with officers to make the language as concise and tight as possible, but that's been done whilst maintaining the same priorities and keeping the same overall aims and ambitions in the document. The other large job of work that's been done in the past 3 months really is the public engagement that's been done. We chose to go out to people in the community rather than try and hold specific events for people to come to, because we found before that's the best way to get in touch with a good number of people, and also a good range of people from different backgrounds, areas, different interests. The response has been overwhelming. There's 999 people who've been spoken to as part of the process. So I'd like to thank Kath Cleese, Neil Jones and his team for the work that they've done in coordinating that public engagement. The public engagement results very overwhelmingly came back in favour of the 3 priorities that we've outlined. People were talked through the priorities in the previous corporate plan, and people agreed that given the resource strain that's on us as a council, the diminishing resources that we had, the 3 priority areas that we'd chosen, i.e. education, protecting the vulnerable and cleaning and greening of the borough, were the right 3. So there was a great deal of support for that. The other main job of work that's been going through is really meetings between myself and various officers, which have been coordinated with Mark Sharwood, who I'd like to give a word of thanks to his meticulous work in going through with me and with chief officers in other areas and operational officers in other areas, really line by line and word by word the document, so that there's no unintended consequences from this, and that we know exactly what we're offering as a policy vision. That officer challenge will obviously continue as we move towards the more operational part of the next corporate plan, which will be the business plan that sits underneath this political vision, so that officers can work out exactly how they'll try and deliver the priorities that we've set. The forthcoming budget, of course, is we're keen that that's very much interlinked with this. I think that it's been right that we've started the process in good time so that they could inform each other, because there's no point in having a corporate plan if the money doesn't follow it, if the thing happens in reverse almost. So the budget that we're trying to shape at the moment will very much listen to the priorities in here if they're agreed by Council, and try and tie the two things together, putting education, cleaning and greening and protecting the vulnerable at the front and centre of our medium-term financial planning. As you'll see from the document, there's three clear priorities that we've chosen here, that of the three priorities I've just described, and the section at the end of the document about how we try and deliver those priorities, how we treat our employees the right way, and how we listen to members of the public. It's very much phrased in the terms of a social contract, because that, I think, is the best way forward, talking about what people have a right to expect from us as a council, but also what we have a right to expect as a council and as a community from citizens. And I think that's very important in a time of decreasing resources. Of course, all these things are choices. The favourite phrase of someone who used to work here was that you can do anything but you can't do everything. That's the harder side of prioritisation, and I'd like to thank members for engaging with the process leading up to the corporate plan very much in that spirit. So this will hopefully now be taken forward so that it's in place for the start of the 2016-17 financial year, and officers can really start to plan using this document as our overarching corporate priorities. Nothing more to add at this point, really, unless anyone's got any particular questions for either me, Mark, or other chief officers.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Members, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a comment, really, and tied in with a question, really, Anthony. Thank you for that presentation, by the way. What I'm concerned about is, and you mentioned the public engagement. I know it's a difficult thing to get people to respond to public engagement, but surely we can't be happy with the number of people that have made their views on this very, very important subject. I don't know how we go about engaging the public on such an important issue, but I think we need to get better figures than that you've mentioned earlier, Anthony. And that's not to say that Neil Jones and Kath Cleaves did a very good job trying to communicate with the public, but sometimes I feel talking to people as they're coming out of a supermarket isn't the ideal solution.
Thank you. Councillor.
Well, thanks for that. It's a difficult one, as you say, really, isn't it? We've tried more sort of formal settings before to hold sort of consultation events, and got a handful of people in some cases. So what we tried this time, we noted that last year when we did it, the best sort of response we got, both in terms of numbers and engagement, was at the at Widdershins at the Age Connect Centre, which was a pre-existing group that we could go along to and talk with. So we've tried to really take that forward to go along to places where people are, to libraries, to supermarkets and places where the market in Pontypool, places where people already are, so we can engage with them that way, because we felt that that's the best way to get numbers, as opposed to going along to meetings that we've organised and getting a handful of people. But it's not easy, as you say. People have got busy lives, people have got other things to be getting on with, and until they really see the results of something, like there's a closure proposed or something like that, they don't really have the time or the interest to engage, and I understand that, and that's what we have to try and get around in a way, and because we rightly want to speak to people before we put plans into place rather than afterwards. Otherwise, it's more difficult for them to shape what we do. But it is that sort of catch-22 situation that if you go to people before you make plans, it's all a bit sort of all a bit sort of not distinct enough for them to be able to put their finger on and engage with. But I think we did do a good job of work this time, and officers did good work in trying to contact as many people as possible. And the exercise that they did with them, with deciding which baskets they put their eggs in, was an exercise that people found interesting. I made sure I didn't attend too many of their sessions so that people were free and open to say what they thought rather than being shy about it. Not that I think they would be if I was there. But but I did go along to the end of a couple of the sessions and spoke to a few people after they'd done the exercise, and they thought it was interesting both in terms of them being able to voice what their priorities were, but also in terms of them being able to understand the conflicts that there are within our budgetary process and within our prioritisation process. They saw that it wasn't easy and that they wanted, the most regular comment that we had from people was, can I have some more eggs, please? Which I think would probably tie in with where a lot of us are in this room. We'd love for the Chancellor to give us some more eggs so we could put them in more baskets, but unfortunately that's not where we are. So I take your point. Public engagement is always very difficult, and we should always look to see what we can do next year that's better than the year before. But I really think this year has been a good effort by officers in making sure we speak to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Next we've got Councillor Bevan, then I've got Councillor Kemp. Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Anthony, for the presentation. I can see it's difficult, obviously, with resourcing and allocation of those resources and setting out priorities. The concern I've got is that are we cutting it too far? Because we had quite a number. I think we had 9 previously, if I'm correct. I may be wrong on that, but we had quite a higher number of priorities that we were focusing on before, and we seem to be trimming it a lot, just down to these 3. I notice in the report you do say that there is some scope for a review going forwards, and I hope that that would be looked at, in the future, to make sure that the 3 that we're focusing on remain current and valid, and when times and conditions change, for us to be able to extend the scope of the priorities, hopefully by increasing them, building the numbers back up down in the future. Also, with regards to the cleaner and greener, the priorities there are all legitimate, but within this particular area we have waste service standards, and yet the report doesn't mention in any way the service level agreement that we've got in place for waste, and I thought that might have been something that might have been in the report, given the department has already done a lot of work there into the service standards. So those were my 2, one question and 1 issue. Thank you.
Just thanks for the recognition that the resource allocation is difficult. I think we felt that it was better to go with fewer priorities and deliver them rather than to try and sort of risk making everything a priority and not delivering on everything. I think the previous corporate plan had 7 priorities, if I'm correct. As for his question about will it be reviewed going forward, I'd certainly give that undertaking as long as I'm here. Obviously, this corporate plan sits at the tolerance of the members of the council, and if we decide as a council at a future point that we think differently, then that's our right. However, I think it's right to try and set it over 5 years to give officers some certainty in how they plan and prioritise and how they work and resource our work. As for can it be extended in the future, I hope so. If we see a light at the end of the tunnel of budget cuts, then obviously that puts us in a different place. It puts us in a place where we can look to be more expansive rather than trying to retrench in on a small number of priorities. The point you make about cleaner and greener, I think that's a legitimate point for the operational part of the plan as it goes in. I think under the part of the plan that sits underneath this, the business plan, I think can draw in a lot of these things. This document's very much been intended to be written in terms that a member of the public who isn't sort of familiar with all the technical parts of our work as a council would be familiar with. So perhaps that's why things like why the service level agreement isn't mentioned specifically, but I'd certainly think that would be something that would be mentioned in the business plan that sits underneath it.
Thank you. Right, we've got Councillor Kemp and Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally accept the proposed three priorities, that is cleaning a green Torfaen, raising education attainment and supporting for Torfaen's most vulnerable residents. I am disappointed though that there's not a fourth, and that's in regarding the investment and development of Torfaen, in particular in regarding employment, if you like. The fact that the younger generation is covered in regarding education. We've got our most senior members of the community covered in regarding the vulnerability, but there seems to be little priority in regarding the residents of working age as such, and so I would ask that, given every opportunity, further consideration is put towards the investment and development of Torfaen. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the positive comment at the start from Councillor Kemp. I agree that the economic development area is an important thing. We've chosen deliberately education as being a sort of a key to that going forwards. The more we can raise educational attainment and raise the qualifications of people coming through, the better the employment prospects of people in our borough will be. The danger being, if we start to add more priorities, then sort of 3 or 4 other people come in with 3 or 4 other areas. But I take your point, and I think in this council we'd all view the economic development of the borough, especially with the work that the leader's doing with city deals and city regions, is an important part of our work. And I don't think that would conflict with this corporate plan. But I really think that the 3 sort of things that we tried to put front and centre have to stick out above and beyond anything else.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Right, Councillor Rees.
Thanks very much for that. Just a couple of points, really. We're not talking about council tax in the corporate plan, and I'm going to come back to that. And the other thing is sort of linked to what Councillor Kemp said a little bit. It's about where we are with skills, driving up skills and delivering jobs and regeneration. So I'm sort of wondering could we have a phrase in the corporate plan around ensuring there is good value for council taxpayers, so that the demand for improved services is balanced with affordable council taxes? That'd be one. And the second one, briefly, is to seek to regenerate local communities and cooperate with neighbouring local authorities to drive up skills and deliver jobs and regeneration. I was wondering what your thoughts are on those 2 ideas.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I mean, city region, city deals a lot with the regeneration side of things. On the council tax, that's something we've always acknowledged as part of our medium-term financial plan, the need to balance the need to protect and retain services with the need to keep council tax down as much as we can for hard-pressed residents. So that's something certainly I think we'll take forward as part of our medium-term financial plan.
Thank you, Councillor Morby.
I think all of us could actually put forward other items of activity which we'd like to see in the corporate plan priorities, because for each of us we think that they are a priority. But that was the trouble we had got into with the last corporate plan. We had 9 or 10 priorities, and when you have 9 or 10 priorities, in fact you have none, because none of them are sufficiently prioritised in order to make them a priority. Adult education, training for employment, collaboration with other authorities, those are all activities which we continue to try and provide. But in the end, when push comes to shove, you have to make a choice. And the choice we are making in putting forward as a majority group these particular items are those which we feel are most important in terms of the current situation. We want to make sure that schools do have as good a deal as we can make. We want to make sure that older people, people with disabilities, those under threat really from the cutbacks in welfare benefits and so on, are actually protected as far as we're able to. And this is a statement of our intent in that regard. And in terms of cleaning and greening, I think what we're saying is that we've got it wrong over the last few years. We cut too much, and we are trying to do something to improve those services in order to ensure that people actually feel proud to be part of Torfaen and live in Torfaen, rather than to have some of the comments and criticisms that we quite rightly have received in the last few years because we haven't spent enough on those particular areas of activity. So, yeah, we all could have different priorities. We all could add to the list of 3. In the end, this is what we feel is appropriate for the moment. We feel welfare particularly is under threat from the measures being introduced by UK government. We're a bit worried, let's confess, about how education is going to fare following the Welsh Assembly elections in May. So we're saying quite clearly we want to give priority to education, and we owe it to our residents to do a better job in actually ensuring that their environment is something that they can be proud of. And hopefully, if they see that we're making greater efforts, they will respond in kind. So that's where we are at the moment, I think. And I hope that members will support this across the board. It's not to say that we will ignore the other important issues that other members have raised.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Very eloquently put, as always, by Councillor Morby, and that is the conundrum. I would point to priority 3. I think he's drawn out a point that hasn't been mentioned yet, but is well worth pointing out the impact of things like benefit reform on members of our community, and the very deliberate choice to explicitly put in priority 3 about reducing inequality. I think that's something that's not talked about distinctly sometimes enough by local authorities, but I think it should be a very distinct aim of ours to support those bearing the brunt of inequality and to try and reduce inequality in our community.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hayes, then I've got Councillor Welton, the leader. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Most of my questions have already been asked by other people. There's just the one very simple 4.2.5 starts with, as the priorities were drafted by the member working group. Can somebody confirm who sat on that member working group, please?
Councillor Hunt.
That was myself, members of the Cabinet, scrutiny chairs, and others appointed by the Labour group to try and draw out a proposal from the majority group.
Thank you. Leader, I'd like to ask a question.
I want to follow on from Councillor Morby and congratulate Anthony on this. This is an excellent piece of work. If you go back to the first corporate plan we had, it was about 1.5 inches thick, with about 9 priorities in there, taking you nowhere. This is more focused. I also know the amount of work that Anthony put into this, and officers, that he looked for best practice right across the country, not only in Wales. There were some corporate plans that were 2 pages thick. You know, the different local authorities do it in different ways. So he's done an excellent job here, and I know he put a lot of work, and the officers with him, put a lot of work into doing research to see what else was happening in other parts of the country. Well done.
Just very quickly, the point about best practice is a good one. I think it's important for us to look outside of the borough, and I think outside of Wales in this case too, because English authorities are, in many cases, 2 or 3 years ahead of the game on this. Authorities like Plymouth, I think South Gloucestershire, Greater Manchester Tameside, the Coventry, and some of the London boroughs have done really good sort of pioneering work in writing political visions that sit at the top of their corporate plans.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? No? Right then, the recommendations are on page 37. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Anyone against? Anybody abstaining? Okay, thank you, members. The recommendations are agreed. Right, we'll move now on to agenda item 11, local transport plan. Steve Jarrett, Head of Highway, can you come up and present the report for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't take you through the report in detail, but if I could just highlight to some parts of the report. If I could take you to the purpose, which is to seek approval of the local transport plan as council policy. In paragraph 3.1, it's noted that the council had to produce a local transport plan on the expiry of the regional transport plan, and we chose to do this as a group of 5 South East Wales Valleys local authorities. If I could take you to paragraph 5.4, just to note that the schemes that we haven't included as directed in the guidance by Welsh Government, these being rail and trunk road schemes, which are generally outside the remit of local authorities. In paragraph 5.5, the format and the guidance of the LTP is discussed. In 5.6, worth noting that whilst we've produced a combined local transport plan, we have, as local authorities, produced individual lists of schemes we would like to see progressed, and the prioritisation of those schemes for any funding will be within our gift, so we're not prioritising regionally across all authorities. Now if I could just take you to paragraph 7.2, which highlights what the outcomes of the local transport plan could be. Finally, just to take you to the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Evans, Councillor Bevan. Then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a comment, it is, Mr. Mayor. It's regarding the transport links to Neville Hall Hospital in Abergavenny. I know residents in my ward and further down in the north of the borough have to access 2 buses to get to Neville Hall. And when people are ill, they don't want to be getting off one bus, waiting half an hour for another bus to get to Neville Hall. Is there any way that this transport link could be improved under this plan? Or is this not a subsidised service? Perhaps you could comment on that, please, Steve.
Thank you, Councillor. The bulk of the bus service within Torfaen is commercially operated. We subsidise very little of it. There may be services that we do subsidise, but I would need to come back to you on that. The plan does recognise the issues caused by public transport perhaps not serving as all would want it to serve. Hopefully we would be able to improve that, but realistically it's down to advising operators of the concerns of the community, and then them perhaps choosing to respond to it, bearing in mind it is a commercial operation for them. I would say that with things like the Metro, there could be some improvement there, because the Metro is about public transport, turn up and go connectivity, and also seamless ticketing, so that could bring improvements to bus services in the future.
But I just come back in there very briefly, Chair, to say that I'm particularly concerned about the elderly population in the north of the borough, which we all know about, who have got very, very low ownership of cars and are not able to get there by that means as well.
Thank you. Right, next I've got Councillor Bevan, Councillor Curran and Councillor Morby. So Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question, really. On section 3.2, the key messages, the LTPs will replace the 4 regional transport plans that were previously in place. Torfaen's LTP has been jointly produced with Caerphilly, CVC, Rhondda Cynon Taf, CVC, Blaenau Gwent, and Merthyr Tydfil. Given that the ministers in Cardiff is now leaning towards mergers with councils, which would see us potentially linking up with Newport and Monmouthshire as well. I was wondering why it was the inclusion of Merthyr Tydfil there, and I wanted to ask whether any approaches or collaboration had been made with Newport and Monmouthshire councils, please?
Yes, in terms of the regional transport plan, that covered the 10 South East Wales local authorities previously. When we were directed to produce the local transport plans, the director of the Environment Group got together and the question was raised about who would want to be involved in producing a joint local transport plan. Only the authorities that we are part of wanted to produce a joint transport plan, local transport plan. The other authorities wanted to produce their own plans. Now, that's not to say that we don't have any discussions with the other authorities. We recognise that transport doesn't stop at even the 5 authorities that are mentioned. It expands further, particularly for us into Newport and Monmouthshire. So much as it's not a joint transport plan, we certainly have discussions with them on schemes that would either benefit our authority and regionally. So we do work together with them.
There you go, Councillor Curran next, then Councillor Morby, then Councillor Powell. Councillor Morby. Oh, sorry, Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, what I've been looking at is page 164, the Land for Specialist Critical Care Centre and links to Cwmbran and Caerleon. I'm very concerned that isn't in there until 2030. We are hoping that the Welsh Government will come forward shortly with some plans for that specialist critical care unit in Llanfredfa. There are a number of difficulties accessing that site at the present moment. I have been trying to get a bridge across the dual carriageway there for a considerable period of time because there is a housing estate there that is totally isolated. I think that we could do with looking at this with a little bit more urgency, really, because once that specialist critical care centre is built, I think accessing to it is going to be, an active travel access is going to be extremely difficult, even from my own community, which is a few hundred yards away, let alone Pontier and the whole of Cwmbran.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I mean, as it's noted in the section up to 2030, that doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't look at it beforehand if the opportunity arises. The Specialist Critical Care Centre has brought forward its own improvements. We would look to gain any other improvement on the back of any further development through there, together with seeking any other funding sources that we could. So if there is opportunity to make improvements there in a shorter time scale, certainly that's what we'd look for.
Could I just come back? I note that earlier on in this there is some comments about active travel, and it says it is considered likely that future funding will be made available from the Welsh Government to fulfil Active Travel Act requirements as a result of new legislation. Do you think this may be of any help in speeding up this process at this point?
We need to look to prioritise the schemes that we have across the local transport plan. There isn't a huge amount of funding coming out of Welsh Government at the moment. We have been invited to bids for some schemes this year again, which is positive, but they are restricted in terms of the numbers and level we can put in. So it could be that we'd have to look at our earlier priorities at the moment, and then look to things like Llanfredfa and active travel when the demand is greater, once there's more development there, which then we can make a better case for.
Thank you. Councillor Morby.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that this doesn't give the whole picture with regard to potential developments over the next few years in terms of transport facilities, because it only deals with matters under our own remit, doesn't deal with trunk roads or rail. But it does sort of, to me, indicate by the very figures in the appendices which indicate how much needs to be spent both in the short term and in the medium to long term in each of the authorities. And I did a few calculations. And this, I suppose, what I'm saying, I think, shows there is a significant difference between the size of the authorities, which is obvious, RCT 4 times as big as the smaller authorities, Caerphilly 3 times as big, in terms of what they expect to need over the next few years. And what you've got is, in the short term, the Blaenau Gwent projects, if you cost them at maximum, because, you know, who really knows, they would spend £8 million if they fulfilling those needs. Merthyr would spend 9.3 million, we would spend 9.8 million. Caerphilly would spend 47 million, and RCT would spend 85 million. Quite a significant difference, I would have thought, partly caused by the fact that the larger authorities are larger and therefore have more roads, more needs. The medium to longer term, the projects in there amount to 20.5 million for Blaenau Gwent, 11 million for Merthyr, 36.7 million for Caerphilly, 57.5 million for Rhondda Cynon Taf, and 50 million for Torfaen. Now, if you take the short-term projects as a percentage of the overall need, i.e., put those two figures I've just quoted together for each authority, and how many are we planning to do in the short term, and how many are beyond the short term, in the medium to long term, you find that in Blaenau Gwent, with £28 million being spent altogether, 8 million in the next 5 years, that equates to 28 or 30% thereabouts of their overall programme. In Caerphilly, it's 56% that they are planning to spend in the next 5 years, 56% of their overall investment. Merthyr, it's 45%, and RCT, 56%. Torfaen is 16%. So it's, as a percentage, it's 3 times less than RCT and Caerphilly and Merthyr, and only half the amount that is being applied in Blaenau Gwent over the next few years. So the question I'm asking you, and I'm sorry I haven't given you notice of it, but I only did this last night, is why, as a percentage of the overall need in Torfaen, are we dealing with such a small percentage over the next 5 years?
I think if you look around the various authorities, using Blaenau Gwent as an example, there's been massive investment in significant highway infrastructure in Blaenau Gwent in the last few years. Cwm Bypass, the works, they've done particularly well in large-scale infrastructure improvements. We haven't done so well in Torfaen in large-scale infrastructure improvements, which means that we've still got a lot outstanding, which perhaps puts our 2030 programme, still a significant programme. When you bring that to what we then look to deliver within the short term, we have to be, or we were told to be realistic about what we could do. So in terms of how much money we're likely to get, we know there's not huge sums of money over the next few years. So within the short-term programme, we've kept it perhaps conservative, whilst recognising that the long-term programme, there's some sort of fairly major pieces of work that we'd like to do out there. Possibly too aspirational in the longer-term programme, but let's aim for the moon and get a start, perhaps.
It's not the long-term programme, I suppose, I'm worried about. It's the short-term, where we're looking at maximum cost. If those figures are accurate, we would be looking for 1/10 of the amount that RCT is looking to spend in the next 5 years. Now, historically, I agree what you say about Blaenau Gwent. Blaenau Gwent has been favoured in the last few years in terms of spend on transport. Presumably that's Welsh Government money as opposed to their own, or they've applied successfully for grants, but we're talking about trunk roads and rail connections. And I can remember, not many in the room can remember, I suspect, the old days of Glamorgan County Council, where it said that Glamorgan County Council ran the Welsh office in those days, and they were next to each other in Cathays Park, and Glamorgan County Council offices were about 20 times as big as the Welsh office. That's sort of changed now, because you've got the Welsh Assembly offices in Cathays Park dwarfing the old Glamorgan County Council offices. But yeah, in those days, Glamorgan County Council decided what went on in Wales, particularly in South Wales, in terms of Welsh Office funding of infrastructure. So that does happen, but isn't it up to us now to make a case to Welsh Government to say, this is what's happened historically. We see the dual carriageways going up to Merthyr. We've seen them for 20 years. We've seen it on the A470. We're seeing it now on the heads of the valley. Where are we getting similar support in relation to our transport needs, particularly up the valley to Blenavon? And that's where I'm coming from, really. We're not getting the sort of support we need. And I think you need to be more aspirational in the next 5 years rather than in the next 10 years after that.
I was going to say, Steve, there's a lot there to take in. Would you like to come back at a later time with the full answer for Councillor Moby? I've got next Councillor Powell, then Councillor Wellington, the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you'll be glad to hear us less involved in that one. So, I just want to quickly preface it by saying that I'm particularly interested in the public transport aspects of this, because I don't drive, but technically speaking, I'm in the golden sort of spot for somebody who doesn't drive in Torfaen. I live next to Cumbraen Shopping, so got the bus centre, got the train station, but it's still very difficult to use public transport because there's no link up between timetables, it's expensive, etc., etc. But all of that obviously is out of our control because they're commercial enterprises and we don't have control over rail. But there's a lot in here about encouraging use of public transport. So my question is, how are we going to do that? When it is unattractive. Really, if you own a car, why would you get rid of it to do that? It's something that you do if you can't get a car. So,
I think encouragement will be down to lots of bodies. It's down to us, certainly on a local level, but certainly Welsh Government are very much encouraging the use of public transport at the moment, with their subsidies for senior citizens passes, also the new pass for younger people, and indeed the metro concept, which is Welsh Government concept. It's about turn up and go integration for transport, so the links would be there. Hopefully that would be more of an encouragement. If you literally can turn up at a bus stop, know there's going to be a bus in 5 minutes to go where you need to be going, then that will encourage. But it's lots of people have got to do a lot of work to try and encourage it, including us as local authorities, but others as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wellington.
Yeah, I want to agree with Councillor Morby 100% actually, that we need to be more aspirational. I've been envious of some of the developments in terms of infrastructure which have occurred in Blaen y Gwent over the years, and part of that is down to the fact of the closure of the steelworks and then money's pumped in there. But I think that we need to be more aspirational. I don't know whether to let you into this little secret, I probably will. But we are at the moment discussing the issue around city deals and city region. And different local authorities are leading on different aspects of that. Our authority will be leading on IT. But we have already identified 3 areas where we consider to be our priority. The first priority, and it's been there ever since I've been on the council for 35 years, and that is the development of the road from Pontypool to Bryn Mawr. The most important infrastructure project that we can think of. That's the one. The other one is IT, I won't go into that, but we'll need a report coming obviously to council about that. And the other one is about R&D units to service the new hospital in Llanfechfa. I think when we talk about the city regions and city deals, we're on about a long way away for that, and Brian's right. What do we do between now and then? So we will be bringing a report to council where this will be fully discussed. I think all members of this authority, since I've been on here, have said that the key issue as far as infrastructure is concerned is to get the road from Pontypool to Bryn Mawr. That's our most important. And I believe that we need to do more work on that. And so whether we bring a report as part of the argument, because the report got to come back now with the city deals and city region to us, in terms of what are the priorities for the 10 local authorities and whether we agree with them, whether we agree with the business case, and so on. And at that point in time, there are going to be serious questions asked about our infrastructure. So I don't know, we'll have to talk to the Chief Executive about this, about whether it's appropriate to bring an interim report in terms of how can we do more to argue for the road, or whether we lump it in with the arguments and with the discussions that's going to come forward within the next couple of months about what we consider our priorities are within these city deals. But I agree absolutely with every point that he made.
Do you want to reply, Chief Executive?
Just to clarify, I think where we're going with the city deal, it is still, embryonic discussions at the moment. There's a gateway. There's several gateways, if you like, to getting to the final city deal. My understanding is the first one is that we have to, as a collective of 10 local authorities, convince central government that we are actually able to put together a city deal. So that's not about individual projects. That's about saying, is there the appetite and the capability within Wales to do a city deal around the Cardiff region? Now, my understanding is there's a lot of activity going to take place between the 10 local authorities and central government before the 16th of March, which is the deadline that the Chancellor has set to want to make an announcement that he is, in principle, willing to do a city deal with Cardiff and the Cardiff region. Now, as I say, that won't be about individual projects, but we will be bringing a report to Council before the 16th of March, just to say to members, this is how far we've gotten to agree in principle that we'd like to continue with the negotiations, and that will be as far as it will go at that stage. Should we pass that gateway and the Chancellor make an announcement on the 16th of March, there will then be a lot of very detailed activity over the next few months, probably going up to the period late autumn before Christmas, when we actually sharpen up what the projects will be, how much they will cost, how much each party should contribute in terms of finance, because the money will come from central government, from Welsh Government and from local government if it goes ahead, and what the timescale is. And obviously you'll need some very clear advice from Nigel, a Section 151 officer, about what you might be committing for a long period of time in terms of this Council's obligations should we go ahead. So, as I say, there will be a report before the 16th of March, but that will be about in-principle commitment to continuing with negotiation. And it will, if that goes ahead, it will really be that period from March to the end of the year when we'll be sharpening up what the projects might be.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back in again, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. I mean, this is all well and good, and I think it's great with regards to these long-term plans with the metro and all the rest of it for improving infrastructure. But there are a couple of things, the leader and Councillor Morby have alluded to perhaps an interim plan, what we need to do. What are we going to do with regards to addressing the shortfall in the essential backlog in highways maintenance? We know that there's a £30 million backlog for the current infrastructure before we start approving plans for long-term major commitments and involvement in grander schemes. We need to address the state of the highways we've got at the moment. I mean, this year there's only about 1.4 million being expended on it, and that was 400,000 from Torfaen and 1 million borrowing from the Welsh Government. So that I felt should form part of the plan in terms of what we're going to do to improve the current highway infrastructure. And also another thing about this, forgive me if I haven't seen it in the report, but I don't seem to see anything in there with regards to the M4 and the plans for the M4 bypass and Bringlass tunnels, and obviously that is another factor, and I don't know whether that's because Newport and Monmouthshire haven't collaborated to the extent that the other county borough councils have in terms of producing a joint objective report. I wonder if we can have some comments around those 2 points, please.
Yeah, certainly comes to the first one. This is a transport plan for sort of where we would like the transport network to be in a number of years. It does tie in with maintenance, but we also have an asset management plan for maintenance, which picks up how we ought to invest the funding we have in our highways maintenance area of work. So they are connected, but also they're separate as well, and the funding streams are separate. So we need to have the two plans in place. In terms of the M4, the M4 is a trunk road, so is a motorway. Sorry, so it's under the remit of Welsh Government. So I personally haven't had much involvement in that scheme, other than to be aware of the scheme as a member of the public, as we all are. That's my involvement along with that. I'm not sure how much involvement Newport would have had, not being the Highway Authority for the M4 as well, but they could have had closer involvement, obviously being just in their area.
Mr. Mayor, can I was with Edwina Hart yesterday and the other leaders, and that very question was asked, you know, what's happening with the M4, and she gave assurances to everybody that it's full stream ahead.
Thank you, members. Any more questions then before we move on? No? Right, the recommendation is on page 45. We are asked to note the contents of the report and to approve the adoption of the LTP as council policy. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Against? And anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. The recommendation is agreed. We'll move now on to item 12. Well, thank you, Steve. We'll move now on to item 12, which is the statement of intent. Dave Congreve, Assistant Chief Executive Communities. Can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just take members briefly through the report, but before I do that, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that, on the face of it, this could be one of the driest reports on today's agenda, but actually I wanted to refer back to some very good material, actually, that helps us illustrate the spirit of what we're talking about here. Earlier on, we had the leader talk about how well matured Cwmbran Newtown has been over the last 50 years. So if you think back, what that means is that 50 years ago, a set of public servants and a set of officers sat around to think about consciously, in 2 generations' time, what will be the type of town, the type of community, the type of society that we want to see created as a result of our decisions. We also had the Deputy Leader refer to the difficulty that you will all face on a day-to-day basis, that I face, the Chief Executive and every Chief Officer faces, which is right here and now, let alone in 2 generations' time, where do we put all of our eggs in which particular basket to get the best return and to meet the needs of our current generations, let alone those in 2 generations' time. So really that's the spirit and the intent of what Welsh Government are asking us to think about when they've framed some legislation that is referred to in this report, and that legislation is around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Now, I know that we've run a members' seminar around it, but you will be hearing an awful lot more about it over the coming months and years. It becomes legislation in April of this year for us as a local authority, and I think quite wisely we referred to it quite heavily in 2 of the preceding reports that you've received today. One around the Constitution and the policy framework, which I'll take us back to in a second, and the other around the corporate plan, in which the requirements of the Future Generations Act is very well cited. So that's the sort of overall context. Hopefully that makes it a little less dry than some of the words that are in the report. But the purpose of the report is to ask Council to approve a new sustainability policy statement, and that follows on from your agenda item 9, where you looked at the policy framework for the Council and some of the very important policy statements of intents and commitments that can actually only be changed constitutionally by full Council. And it's certainly the case that this Council previously has considered its commitment to sustainability in that way, and that's the recommendation of this report as well. The background I think I've touched on in terms of the sort of dynamic about current needs and the needs of future generations, and the fact that in all public services we're asked to be much more cognizant of that. and part of that is around the legislation that Welsh Government is putting in place, which is referred to in 4.1. The existing policy statement is referred to in 5.1, where we talk about the fact that it was put in place some 7 years ago, so it does seem very timely given the new corporate plan, given the new legislation, given a whole range of challenges that are facing local authorities that weren't there 7 years ago, that we look again at our commitment and our statement of intent. So really, in terms of risks, well, I suppose to some extent the most significant risk facing us if we don't approve the policy statement, then really we are not demonstrating what will become a requirement after April, which is showing our clear intent about a commitment to future generations and balancing those needs across that sort of 50-year, two-generation time span. And really the statement itself, if I just take you to that on page 189, is based entirely around the wording in the Act, in the sense that the Act, as you will know from your members' seminar, requires local authorities and other public organisations to set wellbeing goals. They also apply at a national level, and there'll be a series of Welsh Government indicators around those. More importantly, I think, in terms of our next sort of 3 to 5 years particularly, I think the Act picks up on 5 ways of doing things, if you like, 5 ways in which we can start to think much more consciously about the way in which public services need to respond to the challenges of the future. And that's around how do we do things in a more integrated way. That's around how do we do things with a much more conscious long-term outlook. How do we do things in a way that prevents some of the problems that we are currently having to deal with here and now, spending our eggs on, if you like, when in actual fact, if we did things differently now, we could prevent some of those problems from occurring. How do we work with each other as a set of public services and with Welsh Government nationally and potentially internationally on some of these problems? And how do we ensure that some of the debate you've had earlier on about the difficulty of engaging and involving local residents gets embedded in everything that we do? So those 5 ways of working, I think, are very much enshrined in the policy statement, because they will be very, very important in terms of how we start to evidence our commitment to the Future Generations Act. So the policy statement really doesn't commit us to anything that the duties now placed on us already require us to do. And so on that basis, members, I would just take you to the recommendation that Council adopts the policy statement, Appendix 1, which forms part of the Council's policy framework, requiring approval by full Council and as set out in paragraph 4.1.2 of the Constitution. Thank you. I'll take any questions or clarification if I can.
Thank you. First was David Daniels indicated, then we'll have Councillor Evans.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't think Dave does it justice by saying it's dry. I actually find it really interesting. It's the first of its kind in the world, so the Welsh Government are leading on this, which I'm very proud of. And it's core to everything we do, so everything that's in our agendas, it touches on that. It's central to that. It embeds, as discussed by Dave and the workshop that we ran, I think a few months ago, it embeds a sustainable practice in everything we do, ensuring that we more effectively utilise what resources we have, which in the light of continuing austerity is going to become the only way forward, really. And ultimately the aim is to secure the future for the people of Wales, hence the name. So I commend this recommendation to adopt it into our policy framework, and I look forward to start thinking in terms of the future generation going forward.
Okay. We're going to need to come back with that, Dave, or shall I go to the next question? I think Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's for information, really, Dave, and thank you for the presentation. It's about the Corporate Governance Review Group. Who makes up that group, and how often do they meet?
Well, the Corporate Governance Review Group, which is referred to there, I probably will pass you over to Linda to how often they meet and the detailed membership, but it's essentially a group of officers who are representing those functions in which we need to see the type of practical changes that the Future Generations Act will infer. So how do we go about our procurement? How do we go about our HR planning? How do we go about our asset management and so on? So each of those lead officers come together to think through now the implications of the Future Generations Act for how they might need to change some of their more immediate requirements and some of their working practices. I don't know whether Linda, as the chair of that, I think you're chair, Linda.
Yes, you're right, Dave. Yes, it's an officer group that I chair, and obviously we have the Section 151 officers, the head of HR, we have head of strategic services, the head of financial services, and we draw in the head of procurement as we need. And we do have links through the executive member for resources, who is the deputy leader, to make sure that we then are able to feed through to the member environment, etc.
Thank you both for that information. And how often do you meet as needed, perhaps?
We meet monthly, or more often as needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Morby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to say really that I was able to read the statement of intent in a shorter time than it took Dave Congreve to actually explain it. And one side of A4, I think, really good, and I would commend that approach to all other chief officers.
Thank you. Any other members got any questions or comments to make now before we move on? No? Right, the recommendation is on page 186. We are asked to adopt the policy statement. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Right, thank you, members. That's with it. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? No? All right. Thank you then. The recommendation is agreed. Right, we go on to item 13, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Nigel, Assistant Chief Executive Resources, can you present your report to us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this is a report that comes every year just to reapprove our council tax reduction scheme. There are no fundamental changes to the scheme from previous years. It's just to include the uprating and amendment regulations, and we've had advice that it's going to be approved by councils every year. Move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Right then, any questions or comments, members? No. Right, the recommendations are on page 193 of your agenda. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Right, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. The recommendations in the report are agreed. Now we go on to item 14, which is establishment of an Education and Achievement Service, which is EAS, Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. Can I have Tom Roberts, who's the Senior Corporate Improvement and Scrutiny Officer, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll attempt to be very, very brief. Essentially, the EAS have asked each council who are part of the EAS to nominate 2 members to sit on their Audit and Risk Assurance Committee in order to strengthen their governance arrangements. As I said, each partner has been asked to nominate 2 members to sit on that committee. I'll pass it over to members for any questions and then move the recommendations.
I move Councillor Alan Furzo and also Glyn Carron.
Right, need a seconder. Right. Thanks. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. And that's everybody. Thank you. Right, that's agreed. Oh, right. Hi, welcome back, both. Right, we'll go on to agenda item 15, which is members' question times. There are 2 members' questions for today on the sheet which is circulated. Can we have the first question, please? Can we have some quiet? Thank you. Can we have the first question from Councillor Jeffries?
Diolch, Mayor. This is for the Executive Member for Communities. Residents and shop proprietors are now alarmed at the level of antisocial behaviour occurring at Fairwater shops, and it's affecting trade and personal security. Please can the Executive Member kindly ask Headley Gwent to increase their level of policing there and to take all necessary steps to bring back order to the shopping area so that residents feel safe and shop proprietors can trade normally.
Thank you. Councillor Daniels.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Rees. Officers have already been on the case and they've received a response from Gwent Police, which as follows. This is an emerging trend that has been identified as a priority and is being addressed by Gwent Police. The local neighbourhood team, assisted by response policing colleagues, have patrolled Fairwater shops every evening during this period and recorded activity in a daily diary. These patrols are also supported by colleagues from the community tasking team, community support officers, who focus patrols on weekends. The police inform us that shopkeepers and the staff have been spoken to during these patrols. The police accept that groups of teenagers gather at the shops, especially so during inclement weather, sometimes in groups of 30. However, when disorder occurs, it is dealt with firmly by the attending officers. In managing the young people, directions to leave orders and lower level engagement is used. Breaches of these directions to leave have occurred, and these have been dealt with at the youth bureaus. So far, it has involved 2 young people. Police colleagues inform us that this remains a ward priority, and the neighbourhood team will continue to patrol the area and reassure shopkeepers and residents. In addition to that, I'm more than happy to work with the 2 ward members over time, just to ensure that the issue is monitored and ultimately addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Have you got a supplementary? No? Right, then we move on to the next question, which is again from Councillor Rees. Would you like to ask a question, please?
First of all, I want to say I'm a community councillor in Cumbrae, so there's a personal interest there. This is for the leader. Is it time to reopen dialogue with the leaders of community and town councils in Torfaen to see if by combining resources a more comprehensive and efficient public service can be offered?
Thank you. Leader?
Thank you for that question. I'd agree with Councillor Rees that we should look to combine resources with other public sector and third sector bodies, including community councils, where we can protect local services by providing better or more efficient services, or by helping maintain a valued service that would otherwise, and thanks to the cuts that's been imposed on councils across Britain from above. To give examples, credit has to go to Crossy Killiog Glanravon Community Council, who stepped into Safeguard Woodland Road Sports and Social Club, or Pontypool Community Council, who have helped maintain the much valued benefits advice service for local residents in the whole of Torfaen, actually. Cumbrae Community Council have worked with us in partnership to hold the annual big event located in the Boaton Lake at Glanravon, and have made a substantial contribution to that. Similarly, Inblanavon Town Council has worked in partnership with Torfaen Borough Council and local traders, forming the Blanavon Town team. Their projects to date include property improvement, grant schemes, town centre clean-ups, and the Blanavon Town website and app. By working together, we can achieve much more than we can alone. Dialogue to achieve this remains ongoing. I know that Duncan Smith has regular talks in recent months, for example, and my door is always open if you've got an idea. Let me just say to you that I've only listed one for each area, but the bottom line is there are literally dozens in each area of ongoing discussions and instances which I could cite where we are working in conjunction with the voluntary sector and with the community councils to try and jointly fund things which otherwise would go through. And so I agree with what you said, but there are discussions going on. And I do know that John Cunningham and Duncan Smith have met, for instance, with the 3 community councils to explore additional ways in which we can achieve our joint objectives. So yes, you are right. Yes, we are doing it. And if you've got any ideas, then feel free to let the officers know what they are.
Thank you. You've got a supplementary, Councillor?
Yeah. I'm particularly concerned about the anti-poverty agenda. So what I was wondering is whether you consider appointing a councillor from Torfaen to lead that activity in conjunction with the community council, so we can get the best bang for our buck. in conjunction with the town and community councils.
Your mic's not on, Leader.
David Daniels falls into his remit, and he's doing it at the moment on a number of different projects, and highly regarded as well down at the Assembly for his activities. Do you want to say something about it? I'll put you on the spot.
No, I don't think you can, David, because it's... yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry. Right, we move on to agenda item 16, which is the date of the next meeting. For your information, members, the next ordinary council meeting will take place on Tuesday, 1st of March 2016 at 10 a.m. in the council chamber. This is now the end of the council meeting. Thanks everyone for your attendance and contributions. Can I just remind you, if you haven't signed the attendance register or the personal interest form, to do so before you leave. Okay, thank you.